The slap landed like a thunderclap. Not a movie slap. Not the kind people shake off. The kind that stops every single person in a room cold. The kind that makes the air feel wrong, like the whole building just held its breath. Room 214 of Alden Medical Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee went absolutely still. Monitors beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rolled. But in that room, nothing. Just the ringing echo of a grown man's hand connecting with the face of a woman who was 34 weeks pregnant. Nurse Dallasay Jackson Mensah, 8.5 months along, still working her shift because that was just who she was, stood between the bed and the window with her hand pressed to her cheek. Her chart was on the floor. Her pen had rolled under the chair. She had not even had time to drop her tablet properly. It just fell. Her eyes did not fill with tears immediately. That came later. First came the shock. That wide, glassy moment where the brain flat out refuses to process what just happened. Standing in the center of the room, Jang Sejun, son of Jang Do-hyun, heir to the Jang Consolidated Empire, a man whose family moved freight, politicians, and fear across 4 states, fixed his collar like he had just done something reasonable. He was 29. Tailored charcoal suit. 2 bodyguards near the door. A jaw that looked like it was carved to look down at people. And eyes that, right now, held zero remorse. "I asked you a question," he said flatly. "And I expect an answer." Nobody moved. The other nurse in the room, a small woman named Trevette Archibald from Birmingham who had been changing in 4 bag, had gone completely pale. The patient in the bed, an elderly woman named Mrs. Cordelia, had grabbed her call button but was too frightened to press it. Dallasay's hand trembled against her cheek. She was trying to hold herself together. Not just for her sake. For the baby. Her baby. Their baby. A baby this man had decided, somewhere between last Thursday and right now, was apparently not his. "Sejun," she started, voice low, controlled, careful. "Do not," he said, pointing one finger, "say my name like I owe you something." Still no one moved. Maybe they were scared of the bodyguards. Probably both of them. The 2 men near the door were the kind of large that made rooms feel smaller. Neither of them looked comfortable with what had just happened, but neither of them stepped forward either. Loyalty had a way of making people stay quiet in the worst moments. Dallasay straightened. Slowly. Even at 34 weeks, even with her whole face stinging, even with the monitors in the hall beeping out her baby's heartbeat, she straightened. Because that was who Dallasay Jackson Mensah was. She did not crumple easy. "You need to leave," she said. Quiet. Firm. Like a woman who had decided that her dignity was the one thing nobody was taking today. "I will leave," Sejun said, "when you admit the truth." "There is nothing to admit. The test was sent to you by someone who wanted exactly this to happen." She gestured at the space between them, at the disaster of it, at the fact that he was standing in a hospital room in his good suit, having just struck a pregnant woman he once told he would die for. He opened his mouth, and that was the exact moment the door burst open. Not knocked, not pushed, burst. Like whoever was on the other side had been walking fast for a very long time, and this door was simply the next thing in his path. The man who stepped in was tall. Not bodyguard tall. Something different. The kind of tall that came with stillness. With calm. He wore dark jeans, a plain navy jacket, and boots that had clearly covered serious distance. His face was deep brown, jaw sharp, and his eyes, when they landed on Dallasay's cheek, on the red blooming there, on her hand still pressed to her face, those eyes changed. Not to anger. Not exactly. More like to a kind of absolute certainty. The look of a man who had just received the final piece of information he needed. One of the bodyguards moved toward him. Just one step. The man looked at him. Just looked. And the bodyguard stopped. That was it. That was all it took. Sejun, to his credit, did not look afraid immediately. He looked annoyed. Who are you? He said. Not even a question. A dismissal. The man did not answer him. He walked straight to Dallasay first. He stood in front of her, cupped her face gently in both hands, tilted it slightly, and looked at her cheek. His jaw moved. He swallowed once. Then he looked at her eyes. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was low and rough and carried something in it, something old and careful, like a person who had spent years learning how to keep their voice steady when the thing they were feeling was anything but. Dallasay stared at him. Her lips parted. "Dolly." He said it like a nickname he had used 1,000 times and then suddenly could not for a very long time. "You okay?" Her eyes finally filled. One tear, then another, then she pressed them shut. "I'm okay," she whispered. He nodded once. Then he turned around. And he looked at Jang Sijuan the way you look at a problem you are about to solve completely. "Who are you?" Sijuan said again, louder this time. The man tilted his head just slightly, studied him, like he was deciding something. "I'm her brother," he said. Simple, clean, no drama in the delivery. But the room shifted anyway, because something about the way he said it, the weight behind it, the stillness, made Trevette take a small step backward, made Mrs. Cordelia release the call button, made even the second bodyguard glance sideways at his partner. Sijuan almost laughed. "Her brother." He said it like it was a joke. "I don't know who you think you are walking in here, but—" "My name," the man said, "is Cassen Jackson Mensah." He let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. "And you just put your hand on my sister." The bodyguard who had taken that one step forward earlier? He took it back. It had not always been like this. There was a version of Jang Sijuan that Dallasay had fallen in love with, and that version had nothing to do with suits or bodyguards or the Jang family name. That version showed up at her door at 11 at night with soup when she mentioned in passing that her throat felt scratchy. That version sat in the back row of her hospital's annual staff award ceremony, in a room full of strangers, just to watch her receive a commendation she said was not a big deal. It was a big deal to him. But that was before. And before felt like a different country now. Dallasay had grown up in Decatur, Georgia. Not the polished part. The part where the grocery store closed at 7 and the school buses ran late and you learned early that if you wanted something done right, you did it yourself. Her mother, Mika Jackson Mensah, worked double shifts at a laundry facility and still somehow made Sunday dinners feel like celebrations. Her father had left when Dallasay was 4 and Cassen was 6. Not dramatically. Just quietly. One morning he was there and the next he wasn't, and Mika never once spoke badly about him. She just kept moving. Cassen was the one who walked Dallasay to school. Cassen was the one who checked under her bed when she said something felt wrong in the dark. Cassen was 8 years old, doing the work of a parent, and never once complained. Then the fire happened. Dallasay was 9. Cassen was 11. A kitchen fire at the home of the family friend they were staying with while Mika worked an overnight, and in the chaos of neighbors and smoke and too many children and not enough adults, Cassen got separated. By the time everything settled, by the time Mika came running and the social workers started asking questions, Cassen was simply gone. Not dead. They never found proof of that. Just gone. And the system, being what it is, eventually stopped looking as hard as a mother needed them to. Mika never recovered from it fully. She kept moving, because that was what she did, but a part of her stayed in that smoke-filled night forever. Dallasay grew up carrying that absence like a stone in her chest. She became a nurse because she wanted to be the person who showed up when things went wrong. She studied hard. She moved to Chattanooga for the position at Alden. She built a life. Careful, structured, real. And then she met Sijuan at the most ordinary possible moment. A parking garage. Level 3. He had a flat tire on an unfamiliar car. Apparently one of his drivers had taken the main vehicle and left him with an older one. And Dallasay, in her scrubs with a shift bag on her shoulder, stopped because she saw someone crouched down looking genuinely lost. She knew how to change a tire. Her mother had taught her. So she changed it. Sejun had stared at her the entire time like she was something he had never seen before. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, handing him back his keys. He called the number she did not remember giving him 2 days later. She still was not sure how he got it. Probably asked around. Possibly bribed someone. But the first thing he said when she picked up was, "I want to take you somewhere. Not a restaurant. Somewhere real. Will you give me an hour?" She probably should have said no. But there was something in his voice that did not match his face or his clothes or the name she had looked up afterward and found attached to news articles that made her careful. He sounded uncertain. Like a man who was used to knowing exactly what to say and had suddenly run out of script. She gave him the hour. He took her to a covered bridge outside the city, one of the old ones that locals mostly forgot about, and they sat on the wooden railing and he talked about his father in a way that had nothing rehearsed in it. About growing up in a household where power was the only language anyone spoke. About learning to perform confidence before he understood what real confidence even felt like. "I don't tell people this," he said at one point. "I know," she said. And she did. That was the beginning. For nearly a year, Sejun was exactly the man from that bridge. He showed up. He listened. He was not perfect. He was occasionally arrogant in public the way someone raised with money and fear tends to be. But with her, he was different. Softer. More careful. Like she was the one place he could put the performance down. When she found out she was pregnant, 7 months into them, she told him sitting in her car in the Alden parking lot with the test still in her hand. She had planned to be calm about it. Measured. She had a whole speech. She got 3 words out before he reached across and took her hand. "We've got this," he said. Just that. No panic. No calculation. Just certainty. She cried. He did not tell her to stop. He just held her hand until she was done, and then he said it again. "We've got this, Dolly." She believed him completely. The change came in pieces. Small ones at first, easy to explain away. A cancelled dinner. A shorter phone call. A moment at a family event where he introduced her by name only, no context, no warmth, and then moved away to speak to someone else before she could finish her sentence. She noticed. She always noticed. But she told herself he was under pressure. The Jang family business had complicated seasons. His father was difficult. There were things she did not fully understand about the world he operated in. Then Hai Hanel arrived in Chattanooga. Dallasay did not know who she was at first. She saw the name in a text that appeared on Sijuan's phone screen. She was not snooping, it was just there, and she saw his expression change when he read it. Not guilt. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like dread wearing a mask of calm. Hai Hanel was not a random woman. She was the daughter of a rival family that the Jangs had a long history with. Sometimes as partners, sometimes as enemies, always as something complicated. She was elegant in the way that came from generations of knowing you were supposed to be. She had known Sejuan since childhood. And she had opinions, loud, well-placed ones, about what a man like Sejuan Jang was supposed to do with his life and who he was supposed to do it with. She started showing up at events he attended. Then at the Jang family home. Then she started calling. Sejuan, to his credit, told Dallasay about some of it. Not all, but some. He said Hai was just business. History. Nothing. But he started coming home later. Started answering questions with half sentences. Started looking at Dallasay sometimes with an expression she could not read. Not anger, not distance exactly, but something unsettled. Like he was trying to solve a problem she did not know existed. She asked him once, directly, "Is something wrong with us?" He said, "No. Stop overthinking." She was 7 months pregnant. She had swollen ankles and a baby pressing on her spine. She did not have the energy to chase something he kept insisting was not there. Then the accusations started. Not from him. From a letter. An actual printed letter, left under the windshield wiper of her car in the Alden parking lot. The same parking lot where they had first really begun. The letter was unsigned. It contained a printed copy of what appeared to be a lab report, DNA probability analysis, or something made to look like one, and handwritten at the top in neat, deliberate print were the words, "He deserves to know the truth about whose baby this really is." Dallace stared at that letter for a long time in her car. She knew immediately it was fabricated. Obviously. She knew whose baby she was carrying. There was no question. There had been no one else. But she also knew, sitting there, that whoever sent it was not interested in truth. They were interested in what Sejuan would do when he received one just like it. And he did receive one. That same week. Delivered to his office. She found out later it came with a recorded voice message, a woman's voice, low and convincing, saying she was a colleague of Dallace's who had seen things she felt obligated to share. Sejuan did not come to Dallace with the letter. He did not call her and ask. He did not sit across from her at their small dinner table and say, "I got something strange and I need to hear your voice when I ask you about it." He went quiet instead. Then colder. Then, apparently, he went to High Hanel's people and asked them about the lab. The lab confirmed what the fake report said. Of course it did. Because the lab was not real. Because the test had never been run. Because the whole thing was built to push exactly the man he was becoming into exactly this moment. Standing in room 214 of Alden Medical Center with his hands still feeling like it belonged to someone he had chosen to become. Dallace had not told anyone all of this yet. Not Trevette. Not the charge nurse. Not a single friend. She had been carrying it the way she carried most things. Alone. Upright. Convinced she could figure it out before it became something she couldn't. But now Cassen was in the room. Standing with his back to the window. Looking at Sejuan with the kind of quiet that was not passive. It was coiled. Patient, like a man who had all the time in the world and none of it for games. And Dallace, hand still on her cheek, baby pressing against her ribs, realized something she had not felt in a very long time. She was not alone. Maybe she had not been alone for longer than she knew. Before we get to what Cassen is really about to reveal, hit that like button right now because this story is only getting bigger from here. And if someone you know needs a reminder that the truth always finds its way out, share this with them today. Stay right here because the next scene is where everything you thought you knew gets completely flipped upside down. Sejuan was not a man who scared easily. That was not arrogance. Or not only arrogance. It was conditioning. You grow up inside a family like the Jangs. You learn early that fear is a currency other people spend. You learn to read a room by who flinches first. You learn that stillness, real stillness, is something most people fake. But Cassen Jackson Mensah was not faking anything. And somewhere underneath the tailored suit and the practiced jaw and the two bodyguards who were currently being very quiet near the door, Sejuan felt something he did not have a clean word for. Not fear exactly. More like the specific discomfort of realizing you have walked into a room that is arranged differently than you thought. He covered it the way he always covered things. With words. "I don't know what she's told you," he said, looking at Cassen with the flat, measured tone he used in boardrooms. "But this is a private matter between." "She hasn't told me anything," Cassen said. "Simple. No edge in it. Just fact. I walked in and saw your handprint on my sister's face." He paused. "That's all I needed." Trevette, still pressed against the far wall, made a small sound. Not a word. Just the involuntary noise a person makes when they hear something that lands exactly right. Sejuan's jaw moved. "You don't understand the full situation." "Then explain it," Cassen said. "Right now." To her face. "With me standing here." Something flickered across Sejuan's expression. Not shame, not yet. More like the recalculation of a man who had built his whole argument on an audience that was supposed to be smaller. Because the truth was, the full situation was this. 3 days before this moment, Sejun had received the second letter. The first had gone to Dallasay. The second came to him, to his private office, addressed by hand, with no return address and a Chattanooga postmark. Inside was the printed lab report. Inside was the voice recording. And inside, folded separately like it was an afterthought, was a photograph. The photograph showed Dallasay in the Alden parking structure, the same one where they had met, standing beside a man in a gray jacket. They were talking. Nothing more than that. Just two people in a parking garage mid-conversation, and the angle of the photo was close enough to look like something it wasn't. Sejun had stared at that photograph for 40 minutes. He knew, on some level, that photographs could lie. He was not naive. He had grown up watching his father use images exactly this way. Cropped, timed, angled to support whatever story needed telling. He knew how this worked. But knowing how something works and being immune to it are two completely different things. Especially when you are already in a season of doubt. Especially when someone has been placing careful words in your ear for weeks. Hai Hanel had been placing very careful words. She never said anything direct. That was the thing about Hai. She was too intelligent for direct. She asked questions instead. Have you met her colleagues? Do you know how she spends her time before her shifts? Has she ever mentioned anyone from before you? Questions that sounded like concern. Questions that were designed to plant seeds that looked like your own thoughts when they grew. And they had grown. Sejun had shown up at Alden that morning without calling ahead. That was deliberate. He wanted to catch her. That word alone said everything about what had happened to the man from the covered bridge. The man who held her hand in the parking lot. The man who said we've got this without a second of hesitation. He found her in room 214, doing her rounds. He dismissed Trevette with a look. He started talking. He was not shouting at first. He started with the questions. Hai's questions, now wearing his voice. Who is the man in the parking garage? What is the real story? Why does this lab report exist? Dallasay had stared at him. Then at the printed report he was holding. Then back at him. Where did you get that? She said. It doesn't matter where I got it. It matters, she said, louder than she intended, one hand going to her stomach instinctively. Because whoever gave it to you made it. Sejun, I don't know who that man in the picture is. I talk to people in that parking garage every single day. I work here. The DNA is fake. She said it clearly. No trembling. No apology. Run a real test. Go to any real lab. I will go with you right now, in these scrubs, 34 weeks pregnant, and we will do an actual test and you will see. He had hesitated. That hesitation, that one moment where he almost came back, almost chose her, was the moment Dallasay would replay for a long time afterward. Because she saw it. She saw him almost return to himself. But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A message. And whatever it said, it pushed him back past the line. You're deflecting, he said. I'm offering you proof. I don't need proof. I need the truth. That is the same thing. And then she had reached for his arm, not aggressively, just reaching, the way you reach for someone you are trying to bring back from somewhere, and he had stepped away from her touch like it burned him. Then he raised his hand. She did not see it coming. Not because she was not watching, but because she genuinely could not believe he would. Even in that moment. Even with everything crumbling, she had not believed he would. But he did. And then the door opened. Now Cassen was asking for the explanation. Standing there. Waiting. Sejun looked at the printed report in his own hand. He had been holding it this whole time, slightly crumpled now, and something about holding it while this man stood calmly in front of him made it feel, suddenly, very flimsy. There is evidence, Sejun started. Show me, Cassen said. Sejun held up the lab report. Cassen walked forward, took it, read it in about 15 seconds, then looked up. Who ran this test? A laboratory. Which one? Sejun named it. Cassen looked at him for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and when the person picked up, he said 4 words, Genova Diagnostics in Chattanooga. Find it. He hung up. That'll take about 3 minutes, he said to no one in particular. Then he turned to Dallasay. Sit down, Dolly. Please. She sat. Not because she was fragile, but because her feet had been aching for an hour and she was 34 weeks pregnant and she had just been slapped and her brother was in the room for the first time in 20 years and her brain was doing approximately 14 things at once. Trevette, quietly, brought her a cup of water. Nobody told her to. She just did it. That was Trevette. The 3 minutes passed. Cassen's phone rang. He listened. Said, "You're sure?" Listened again. Said, "Send it to the secondary number." Hung up. He looked at Sejun. "There is no Genova Diagnostics registered in Chattanooga," he said. "There is no Genova Diagnostics registered in the state of Tennessee. The address on that letterhead is a shipping warehouse that closed in 2021. The room was very quiet. "The lab doesn't exist," Cassen continued. "Which means the report doesn't exist. Which means someone built a lie and handed it to you, and you walked in here and..." He stopped. Not because he ran out of words. Because he chose to stop. "You walked in here and did what you did." Sejun looked at the paper in Cassen's hand. Then at the floor. Then at Dallasay. She was not looking at him. She was looking at her water cup. Sejun started. "Don't," she said. Still not looking up. "Not right now." But Cassen was not done. Because the lab report was only the first piece. The second piece was the photograph, which Sejun, after a moment, also produced. Probably because at this point the ground had already shifted so much that holding anything back felt pointless. Cassen looked at the photograph. His expression did not change. But his eyes. Something moved in them. "I know this man," he said. Everyone looked at him. "The man in the gray jacket." He held up the photo. "I know who this is." Dallasay looked up finally. "You do?" "His name is Terrence Wills. He is a private investigator." Cassen set the photo down on the visitor chair beside him. "He works, or he did, up until about 8 months ago, for a family out of Piltover. A very specific family." He paused. "The Hanols." The name landed differently in that room than it might have anywhere else. Because Dallasay had heard that name. She had heard it from Sejun, casually, as history. And she had heard it more recently in a way she could not quite locate. A feeling, a peripheral awareness that something was circling. But Sejun had gone completely still. "Hi," he said. Barely a word. More like an exhale. "Hi, Hanel hired a private investigator to follow your pregnant girlfriend," Cassen said. Not angrily. Just clearly. He photographed her in a location he knew would be recognizable to you. He compiled false documentation using a fabricated lab identity. And then the material was delivered in 2 stages. First to Dallasay, to make her afraid. Then to you, to make you dangerous. Sejun sat down. He did not look for a chair. He just sat. On the edge of Mrs. Cordelia's visitor bench, like his legs made a decision his brain had not approved yet. Mrs. Cordelia, for her part, had been completely silent this entire time. She was 81 years old. She had seen things. But she was watching this particular unraveling with the focused attention of someone who understood that some stories you witness become part of you. "She planned this," Sejun said. It was not a question. "She planned this," Cassen confirmed. "Why?" Still not a question. More like a word that had lost its structure. Cassen looked at him for a moment. Then he said, because she needed you to destroy this. He gestured at Dallasay, at the space between them, at the whole fragile, beautiful, now broken thing. And you did. The silence that followed that sentence was the worst kind, the kind that tells the truth without any words at all. But there was still the matter of Cassen himself. Because Dallasay, sitting in her chair, one hand on her stomach, baby steady and strong inside her, was looking at her brother the way you look at someone you have been missing so long that seeing them almost does not feel real. Like your eyes need extra time to confirm what they are seeing. "How?" she said finally. "How did you even find me?" Cassen turned to her. And for the first time since he had walked in, his composure shifted. Just slightly. Around the eyes. "I never stopped looking," he said. It took time to get to a place where looking was something I could actually do." "Where have you been?" He exhaled slowly. "That," he said, "is a longer answer. And I will give you every word of it." He glanced around the room, at Sujuan, at the bodyguards, at Trevette, at Mrs. Cordelia. "But not here." Dallasay nodded. Her eyes were full again. She pressed them shut. Her brother crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair so they were at the same level. He put one hand over her hand on her stomach. Gently. "You're okay," he said. "The baby's okay." "You don't know that," she whispered. Almost a smile. "Almost." "I'm going to make sure of it," he said. And she believed him. The way you believe someone not because they have promised you the world, but because something in the grain of their voice has always, even across 20 years and a fire and a whole broken childhood, told the truth. If you are still here and your jaw is somewhere on the floor right now, good, because that means you are paying attention. Drop a comment telling me what you think Cassen's real story is before you find out in the next scene. And share this video with one person who loves a story that keeps turning, because we are not even close to done yet. The next 20 minutes were not loud. That was the thing nobody would have predicted. Given everything that had just happened, given the slap and the fake report and the 20 years and the bodyguards still standing near the door like decorative furniture, the next 20 minutes were almost quiet. The kind of quiet that happens after a storm passes and everyone is still checking themselves for damage. Cassen stood up from beside Dallasay's chair and turned to the two bodyguards. "You can leave," he said. Not aggressively. Not like a man throwing a challenge. Like a man informing two people of something that was already decided. The bodyguards looked at Sujuan. Sujuan, still sitting on Mrs. Cordelia's visitor bench with the expression of someone who had just watched his own house burn down, gave the smallest nod. They left. The door clicked shut behind them. Trevette, reading the room correctly, touched Dallasay's shoulder once and said quietly, "I'll be right outside." She left too. Mrs. Cordelia stayed. Nobody asked her to leave. Maybe because she was 81 and it was her room. Maybe because Cassen glanced at her once and she looked back with a kind of dignity that said, "I have earned the right to witness things." Either way, she stayed. And nobody argued. Sujuan looked at his hands. "I don't know what to say," he said. Which was probably the most honest thing he had said in weeks. "Then don't say anything yet," Cassen replied. He pulled the visitor chair from the corner and sat in it backward, arms resting across the top. Casual. Like this was just a conversation and not the wreckage of several lives being sorted through piece by piece. "I need you to understand something first," Cassen said. "And I need you to actually hear it rather than react to it." Sujuan looked up. "Okay. What you did today is not something that gets fixed with an apology." He said it without heat, without a pointed finger or a raised voice. Just fact, delivered cleanly. "You understand that?" Sujuan nodded. His jaw was tight. "But the reason I'm talking to you at all instead of doing something else entirely," Cassen paused, "is because my sister loved you. Past tense right now. But it was real. And that means you were real at some point. Which means there is a version of you that knew better than this. He tilted his head slightly. I want to know if that version is still in there, or if it's gone. Sejun was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, that I let someone make me into something I wasn't. And I didn't catch it fast enough. He exhaled. That's not an excuse. No, Cassen agreed. It is not. Dallasay had been listening to all of this from her chair. One hand still on her stomach. Eyes moving between her brother and the man who had, in the span of 1 year, been her greatest comfort and her worst moment. She was doing the thing she always did when too many feelings arrived at once. She was sorting them, putting each one in its place before she let any of them speak. It was a skill she had developed young, out of necessity. A child who lost a brother and then helped hold her mother together does not have the luxury of feeling everything at full volume all the time. But the feelings were there. Every single one of them. There was grief, for the relationship she had believed in. There was anger, real, solid, legitimate anger, that had nowhere comfortable to sit right now. There was something complicated about Sejun specifically, something that was not forgiveness and not its opposite either, but some third thing that did not have a name yet. And underneath all of it, vast and warm and almost unbearable in its sweetness, there was Cassen, her brother, in the same room, breathing the same air. 20 years of absence collapsed into one parking garage burst of a doorway entrance. She had 1,000 questions for him. She was saving them. But one escaped before she could stop it. Did you know about me? She asked. Before today, I mean. Did you know where I was? Cassen turned to look at her. Something moved across his face, not guilt exactly, but close enough to its cousin that she recognized it. I found out 4 months ago, he said, that you were here, that you were a nurse, that you were, he glanced at her stomach. I found out a lot in a short time. 4 months, she repeated. I know, Cassen. I know, Dolly. He leaned forward slightly. I needed to make sure that when I came right. That I wasn't bringing anything with me that would complicate your life before I even had a chance to explain mine. She stared at him. What does that mean? Here was the thing about Cassen Jackson Mensah that nobody in that room, except possibly Mrs. Cordelia, who seemed to understand people the way very old people sometimes do, had fully processed yet. He was not just a man who had found his sister. At 31 years old, Cassen Jackson Mensah was the operating head of a network that most people in legitimate circles had never heard of and most people in illegitimate circles spoke about in careful voices. Not because it was criminal, it was not, or not exactly, but because it occupied the specific and powerful space between things. Between governments and their gaps. Between institutions and the people those institutions forgot. Between the world that had paperwork and the world that did not. After the fire, 11-year-old Cassen had been picked up by a county system that processed him quickly and efficiently and placed him with a foster family in rural North Carolina. The family was not cruel. They were simply indifferent in the way that some people are indifferent. Not meanly, just completely. He was a child in a house where nobody was paying much attention. So he paid attention to everything else. He was smart in the way that does not always look like smart in school. He read people. He understood systems. He figured out, early, how things connected and where the connections were weak. By 16 he had quietly located 3 other foster children who had been separated from siblings and helped reunite 2 of them using nothing but public records and a library computer. By 21 he had built something larger. By 25 it was something that people with serious money and serious problems came to when regular channels had failed them. He called it a consulting firm. The people who used it called it whatever made them comfortable. What it actually was a mechanism for making things right when the official mechanisms had given up. He had resources. Real ones. Not bodyguards and suits resources. The kind that were quieter and reached further. The kind that had, in the past 4 months, very thoroughly investigated Hannah's movements, her hired investigator, the fabricated lab report, the voice recording, everything. He had arrived today not because he happened to be passing by Alden Medical Center. He arrived today because he had been watching from a careful distance and he had seen, 40 minutes ago, that Sejuan was heading to the hospital, and the look on Sejuan's face in the parking structure camera, which Cassen had access to, through means that were his own, was not the look of a man going to make things right. He had driven 12 minutes at a speed he would not repeat in polite conversation, and he had walked through those doors at exactly the wrong moment and exactly the right one. Now he reached into the inside pocket of his navy jacket and produced a folded envelope. He set it on the foot of Mrs. Cordelia's bed, the only flat surface available, and looked at Sejuan. "That is everything," he said. "Every piece of what Hannel did and how she did it. The investigator's name, his payment records, the account that paid him, the person that account belongs to, and 3 witnesses who will confirm the voice recording was manufactured in a studio in Piltover 6 weeks ago." Sejuan looked at the envelope, then at Cassen. "How do you have all of that?" "Because I looked for it," Cassen said simply. "Nobody looks for things like that. I do. No elaboration. No performance. Just fact." Sejuan picked up the envelope. He did not open it immediately. He held it with both hands like he was trying to decide whether the information inside was going to make everything better or just make him feel worse about the same things. Probably both. But still. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked. "Whatever you decide is right," Cassen said. "That's not my business." "You're not going to tell me to?" "No." Cassen shook his head. "What you do about Hannel is your situation to navigate. What you do about my sister is something else entirely. But I'm not the one making those decisions for you." Sejuan was quiet. Then, very slowly, he got to his feet. He straightened his jacket out of habit. He looked across the room at Dallasay. She was looking back at him. Not warmly, but not with hatred either. With something clear and level that was harder to face than either of those things, because it was just honest. Just completely, simply honest. "I'm sorry," he said. She did not respond immediately. "I know that doesn't," he started. "It doesn't," she said. "Not right now. Maybe not for a long time." She kept her voice even. "You chose to believe something someone handed you over something you had built with me. And then you came here and did something you cannot take back." Her hand moved on her stomach. "This baby felt that too, Sejuan. This is not just about my face." His jaw worked. His eyes were wet, actually wet, and he did not try to hide it, which was maybe the most human she had seen him look in months. "I know," he said. "Do you?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Then you know that sorry is a beginning, not an ending. And right now it's too early for beginnings." He nodded. Once. Like a man accepting a sentence he knew was fair even though it hurt. "Is there anything you need?" he said. "For the baby. Medical bills. Anything. No conditions." She considered him for a moment. "I'll let you know." It was not a warm answer. But it was not a closed door either. It was the answer of a woman who was not going to be rushed into forgiveness and was not going to perform bitterness either. Just an honest, open, undecided answer. He nodded again. Then he looked at Cassen. Cassen looked back at him steadily. "Don't disappear," Cassen said. "Not a threat. A directive. Whatever you two figure out, be present for it." "I will," Sejuan said. He walked to the door. Stopped with his hand on it. Did not turn around. "The covered bridge," he said. Quietly. Mostly to himself. "I should have stayed that man." Then he left. The room was different after he walked out. Not lighter exactly. More like honest. Like a space that had been holding its shape under pressure and could finally just be a room again. Mrs. Cordelia made a small sound. When Dallasay looked at her, The old woman was shaking her head slowly with the expression of someone who had just finished a very long book. "Baby," Mrs. Cordelia said, "I have been in this room for 6 days and nothing interesting happened until right now." Dalicé laughed. An actual laugh. Sudden and real and a little wet because her eyes were still full. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Cordelia." "Don't you apologize." The old woman waved one hand. "I feel like I just watched a whole movie. I'm refreshed." Cassen made a sound that was almost a laugh. Trevette came back in shortly after. She assessed the room, determined that no one was in immediate crisis, and went back to doing her job with the quiet efficiency that was her entire personality. But she squeezed Dalicé's hand once as she passed. Just once. That was enough. Cassen pulled his chair closer to Dalicé's and they sat together for a while without saying anything important. He asked if she was hungry. She said yes. He produced, from somewhere in that navy jacket, a wrapped granola bar, the good kind, dark chocolate and sea salt, and handed it to her without comment. She took it, unwrapped it, ate half. "You had this the whole time," she said. "I come prepared." "For what?" "For finding your pregnant sister in a hospital standoff." "For long days," he said. "But yes, apparently also for this." She ate the other half. The baby moved, a long, slow roll that she felt from one side to the other, and she put both hands on her stomach and just held that for a moment. "She's active," she said. Cassen went still. "She?" Dalicé looked at him. She confirmed. He looked at her stomach for a moment with an expression that had nothing of the composure or the calm or the quiet authority in it. Just something open. Something unguarded. Like a man looking at something he had not known he was allowed to have. "Does she have a name?" he asked. "I've been thinking about Mika," Dalicé said. The name landed between them like something sacred. Their mother's name. The woman who kept moving, who made Sunday dinners feel like celebrations, who looked for Cassen until the system stopped helping her and then kept looking anyway. Cassen pressed his lips together. Looked at the ceiling for just a second. "Mom," he said. "Half a word. I'll wait." "Yeah," Dalicé said softly. "She's okay?" he asked. "Is she?" "She's in Decatur," Dalicé said. "She has a small house now. She retired 2 years ago. She's okay, Cassen. She's going to be okay." He nodded. His throat moved. "She still makes Sunday dinners?" he asked. "Every single one." He looked down at his hands. Then back up. "I have to go see her." "I know. I should have gone sooner." "Yes," Dalicé said. "But you're going now. That counts." They talked for nearly an hour after that. Not about High Hanel or the fake lab or the investigation or any of the enormous and complicated things. They talked about the smaller things, the things that 20 years of absence create a gap for. What she was like at 15. What he had seen. Where he had been, in broad strokes, leaving the detailed account for another day and a longer space. What her apartment looked like. Whether she had plants. She had 4, she said. He said she always used to take care of things that needed tending. She said, "You remembered that?" He said, "I remember everything." She believed him. 3 days later, in a conference room in Piltover, High Hanel sat across from 2 federal investigators and a civil attorney representing both Dalicé Jackson Mensah and Jang Sujuan jointly, which was a sentence nobody had predicted, and the envelope Cassen had produced was opened and read and confirmed and cross-referenced. And the conversation in that room was the kind that ended careers and reputations, and the specific type of confidence that comes from believing you are untouchable. High Hanel had believed she was untouchable. She was not. The investigator Terrence Wills cooperated immediately, in the way that people who are presented with documentation of everything they have done tend to cooperate. The studio in Piltover confirmed the manufactured recording. The payments were traced. The whole architecture of the plan was visible once you knew where to look, and Cassen had made sure everyone knew where to look. Sejun, for his part, did what Cassen had told him to do. He was present. He sat in that conference room. He provided his own testimony clearly and without deflection. He did not try to protect himself by minimizing what had happened in room 214. He stated it plainly when asked, in writing, and he did not look away from it. It was, by most measures, the most honest thing he had done in months. Possibly the most honest thing he had done in years. He did not try to contact Dallasay directly during those 3 days. He sent one message through a mutual channel, through her nurse supervisor, which was impersonal but also respectful of the boundary she had not stated but had made obvious, asking if she and the baby were medically well. The response came back. They are. He read it approximately 11 times. 6 weeks later, in the very early hours of a Thursday morning, Mika Jang arrived. 7 pounds and 2 ounces. A full head of dark hair and a cry that Trevette, who was on shift and present in the delivery room, described later as the most opinionated sound she had ever heard a newborn make. Dallasay held her daughter and felt something she did not have a full word for. Not just love. Love was too small for it. More like recognition. Like the feeling of finding something you had lost, except you had not even known you were looking. Cassen was in the waiting room. He had driven from wherever he had been. He did not always say where he was, and she was learning that was just him, and he was sitting in a plastic chair with his long legs stretched out and his eyes open when the nurse came to tell him. He stood up. "She okay?" he asked. "Both of them are great," the nurse said, smiling. He nodded, looked at the ceiling for a moment, exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Sejun came to the hospital that afternoon. He texted Cassen first, which Dallasay found out later, asking if it was all right to come. Cassen had forwarded the message to Dallasay and let her decide. She said yes. He came alone. No suit. Dark jeans and a simple jacket, which on him was practically an act of vulnerability. He had the look of a man who had been sleeping poorly and thinking heavily and doing both of those things in that order every night for 6 weeks. He knocked on the door of the room. Dallasay called him in. He stood in the doorway for a moment looking at her, then at the baby in her arms, then back at her. She watched him. She was not going to help him with this. He had to find his own way to it. He walked in slowly, stood beside the bed, looked at his daughter, with an expression that was just entirely undone. No armor, no practiced calm. Just a man completely taken apart by something 7 pounds and 2 ounces large. "Hi," he said, to the baby. Barely a whisper. Mika, who had opinions about everything already, yawned. Dallasay almost smiled. "You can hold her," she said, "if you want." He looked at her quickly, like he had not expected the offer, like he had prepared himself for something harder. "Are you sure?" he said. "I'm sure," she said. "She's yours too, Sejun." That part was never the question. He sat down carefully in the chair beside the bed. She transferred Mika into his arms, showing him where to put his hand, how to support the head, and he held his daughter with the focused terror of someone who had never held anything this important. Mika opened her eyes briefly, looked at him, then closed them again. He made a sound. Not a word. Just a sound. The kind that comes out of a person when language runs out. Dallasay looked away, toward the window. The light outside was the good afternoon kind, gold and low and patient. She could hear the hospital sounds in the hall. She could hear her daughter breathing. She was not going to tell him everything was fine. It was not yet. There were real things to figure out. What kind of presence he would be, what the arrangement looked like, how she would protect her daughter without also keeping her from a father who was, underneath everything, trying to find his way back to the man he had been at a covered bridge in the last honest season of his life. She was not going to make that easy for him, but she was not going to make it impossible either. Because Mika deserved both of her parents trying their very best. And Dallasay Jackson Mensah had spent enough of her life carrying things alone to know that letting someone try was not the same as letting them off the hook. It just meant she was choosing, eyes open, what her daughter's world was built on. Cassen left Chattanooga on a Sunday. He did not like long goodbyes, she figured that out fast. So he came to her apartment the night before, met her 4 plants, ate her cooking, and sat with her on the couch the way siblings sit when they have too much to say and all the time in the world to say it. "You're coming to Decatur with me," he said. "When you're ready. When the baby's ready. To see Mom." "She doesn't know yet," he said. "That I found you. That I'm coming." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't want to tell her until it was real." "It's real," Dallasay said. "I know." He looked at his hands. "I'm scared," he said. Just like that. No performance. The same man who had stopped a bodyguard with a look was sitting on her couch in his plain jacket saying I'm scared about seeing his mother. "She's going to fall apart," Dallasay said. "I know. And then she's going to put herself back together in about 45 seconds and start feeding you." He made a sound. The almost laugh. "That sounds right," he said. "It's exactly right," she said. "I've seen it 100 times." They sat in the quiet for a while. The baby was asleep in the next room in the new bassinet that Trevette had helped assemble 2 days before with varying success and a lot of opinions about instruction manuals. "Cassen," Dallasay said. "Yeah. I'm glad you came through that door." He looked at her. His eyes had the same thing in them they had when she said Mika's name. That open, unguarded thing that the composure could not quite cover. "I should have come sooner," he said. "But you came," she said. "That counts." He reached over and put his hand on top of hers briefly. Just for a moment. The same gesture, almost, as the one in the hospital room when he put his hand over hers on her stomach. Then he took it back. And they sat in the good quiet until it was time for him to go. The road to Decatur was 4 hours on a clear day. They made the drive 6 weeks after Mika was born. Dallasay in the passenger seat with the baby in the back. Cassen driving with the particular focus of a man who was managing a very large feeling by concentrating on very small things like speed limits and lane changes. They pulled up to the small house with the yellow door at 2:15 on a Sunday afternoon. Mika Jackson Mensah Sr. was in the garden. She had her back to the driveway. She was doing something to a plant with the same purposeful energy she had applied to everything for 30 years. Cassen turned off the engine. Neither of them moved for a second. "Ready?" Dallasay said. He exhaled. "No. Me neither," she said. "Let's go." They got out of the car. Dallasay got the baby. Cassen walked around the front. Their mother heard the car doors. She turned. She saw Dallasay first, smiled the immediate reflexive smile of a mother seeing her child, and then her eyes moved, and landed on Cassen. She went completely still. Not the room-going still of Alden Medical Center. Something else entirely. Something internal. The stillness of a person whose whole body has just received news that it stopped being able to hope for and then never actually stopped hoping for. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was older than words. Cassen walked across the garden and his mother grabbed him with both arms, and Dallasay stood at the edge of the garden with her daughter in her arms and let the sound of it, the weeping and the holding and the 20 years of it, wash over her completely. She did not try to sort her feelings this time. She let every single one of them arrive at full volume. All of them. Every one. And that is the end of this story, but not the end of theirs. You made it to the end and honestly, you deserve a standing ovation for sticking with this one. If this story hit you somewhere real, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And drop in the comments. Did you see any of those twists coming, or did Cassen have you completely floored?